Hey guys, as you may already know, I've been working towards getting my Canadian Ultralight pilot permit this year. I recently did what was probably my final flight of the year, and I brought my GoPro camera along so that you guys could have a look at what it's like in the cockpit with me. So in this video, I'm first going to show you one takeoff and landing complete circuit while I talk about the airplane and other stuff, and then after that I'll speed it up a lot more so you don't have to sit through a super long video. Alright, so for this flight, it started out with my instructor Colin joining me in the plane for one takeoff and landing, just to make sure that I'm all good, because it had been a week or two since I had flown before. And then he hopped out, and now I'm backtracking along the runway so that I can turn around and take off into the wind. This aircraft, by the way, is a Tecnam P96 Golf. It's an Italian, all-metal, low-wing, lightweight aircraft, and I believe this particular one was built in 2004. Now I've got the plane lined up for takeoff, and after making a quick radio call, you can see me push the throttle all the way in, and the aircraft starts rolling. It takes a few seconds to pick up speed, and then once I'm at about 40 knots or so, I pull back on the stick and the plane is airborne. Once I get the airspeed up to about 60 knots or so, that's the normal climbing speed for this aircraft, it actually starts to climb very, very fast, especially without a second person on board like my instructor. One of my instruments on the panel here is the vertical speed indicator, and you can see that the plane is actually climbing at a rate of around 1,000 feet per minute, which is pretty fast. This plane has a 100 horsepower engine, which is pretty powerful for a plane of this weight. The weight of the plane is it's actually less than 700 pounds empty, a bit more with fuel and with me on board, but it does have a very powerful engine for this weight class. So for this circuit that I'm flying, you're supposed to be flying this at 1,000 feet above ground level. So to do that, of course, I have to be keeping an eye on my altimeter, which is this instrument here, and it tells me how high I am above sea level. Ground level at this airfield is about 1,500 feet above sea level, so I have to fly at 2,500 feet in order to be 1,000 feet off the ground. If you don't want to have to do that math, I put the height above ground level right here on the screen for you, along with my altimeter reading. So for this flight, I'm just doing a few circuits. That means I take off, I fly back around to the other side of the airfield, and then land again in the same direction that I took off from. And you can see the path I'm flying on the little map in the bottom left corner there. Alright, now that I have the plane up to the desired altitude, I'm making a couple of left-hand turns to get onto what is called the downwind leg of the circuit. And I make a radio call when I do this so that other planes know where I am, so we can all watch out for each other, which is of course a very important thing to do if you don't want to crash into other aircraft. So, the controls for this airplane are pretty basic, as you can see. There's no fancy steering wheel type thing, that's called a yoke. It's just a stick that comes up between your legs. The stick is directly connected to the airplane control surfaces through rods and linkages, so there's no power assistance or anything. There's also pedals down at your feet which control the airplane's rudder, and also the nose wheel, meaning you use the left and right pedals to steer the airplane on the ground. You'll also see that I'm looking around a lot, and that's not just so that I can enjoy the view. I'm also keeping an eagle eye out for other aircraft as well. During my training over the past summer, I've seen other aircraft, usually flying into or out of Kitchener or Guelph, that oftentimes they fail to switch their radio onto our frequency, so they can't hear us and we can't hear them. So we don't know where they are. So that's why it's definitely important to keep a lookout and be spotting other aircraft. And this is uncontrolled airspace that we're flying in, so there could be other aircraft that don't have a radio at all. So now it's time to start turning towards the runway to start the landing approach. So first I'm going to start by making a 90-degree left turn onto the base leg of the circuit, and while I'm doing that I'm starting to slow the airplane down by pulling the throttle back a little bit and pulling up to maintain my altitude but to bleed off some of the airspeed. Once I'm going about 60 knots or so, I'm going to put the flaps all the way down, and you can see me doing that using this little switch near the throttle, and the indicator here shows the current position of the flaps. With the flaps down, the airplane has a lot more drag, which slows us down even more, so I compensate for this by letting the nose drop to maintain airspeed. Now as I'm making the final turn onto the final approach, you can see the runway in the distance there. And I made a radio call to announce that I was on final approach just a few moments ago as well. While I'm on this glide path, I'm trying to maintain an airspeed of about 60 knots or maybe just a little bit less or so. And I know you can look at the airspeed indicator I've put on the screen there, and it's getting actually quite a bit lower than 60 knots, but that's because this is based on GPS data, which only tracks my speed over the ground, so it's not accounting for the headwind that the airplane is experiencing. While I'm on this glide path, I'm looking at the runway very carefully to assess how far, forward towards it I'm moving compared to how fast I'm sinking towards the ground. And I'm adding a little bit of engine power or reducing engine power to extend or reduce my glide ratio. This will hopefully continue in a fairly stable manner all the way until I'm just a few feet off the ground. Although on this particular day there was a pretty substantial crosswind, so you can see I'm kind of fighting to keep the plane steady. And of course at any time if I don't like what I see, I can just hit the full throttle and just get the hell out of there. So then the last thing that we're going to do just before touchdown is called the flare. That's when we pull the nose up to keep the airplane just off the ground for as long as possible, bleed off all the extra speed so that when it finally does touch down, which is right there, there's no longer enough airspeed for it to lift off again, so that the plane will definitely stay on the ground. Then you'll see me pull the throttle all the way back to 0, and then I reach down for the brake handle to gently come to a stop on the ground. So now I'm gonna turn around and do the whole thing again 4 more times. For most of the rest of this video, I'm gonna speed things up so you don't have to sit and watch for the whole 45 minutes. You can also quit out of this video here if you want. At this point, I'm just gonna kind of keep talking about the airplane and tell some relevant stories and things of that nature. So, before each takeoff, you'll see me checking everything in the cockpit. This is standard procedure to ensure everything is in the correct configuration. You don't want to be like just 50 feet off the ground and then you find out the hard way that you forgot to open the fuel valves or something. There's a checklist for this process, of course, but you're watching my 60-second takeoff in this plane right now, so I've got the procedure pretty much totally memorized at this point. Aside from the correct position of the switches and the valves and stuff, the main thing I'm checking is the engine-related instruments on the right side of the panel here, and I check those every few minutes during the flight as well to just monitor the engine performance. If you identify as a gearhead, you might like to know that the engine in this plane is a Rotax 912S. It is a 4-stroke, naturally aspirated, horizontally opposed 4-cylinder engine with air-cooled cylinders and liquid-cooled cylinder heads. It has dual carburetors and twin electronic ignition via magnetos, which is standard for aircraft of this type. As I mentioned before, this engine can make about 100 horsepower at around 5,800 RPM, and it can run on premium automotive gasoline, preferably without ethanol in it, if you can find it. As for the engine instruments, this one is the oil temperature, which is rarely in the green on this flight, but that's expected because it's a pretty chilly day. We put aluminum tape over part of the oil radiator during colder weather, but it looks like there isn't enough on it today. Here is the engine oil pressure, which has to be in the green at all times, or else we're about to have a very big problem with the engine for sure. This one's the ammeter, which shows how much the 12-volt battery is being charged by the alternator, and this one is the battery voltage. These two are the left and right fuel tank gauges. The fuel tanks in this aircraft are inside the wings, and the fuel is pumped into the engine by two pumps for redundancy. One of them is electric and the other is driven directly by the engine. This gauge here is the fuel pressure. This one is broken, but it's just a clock, so it doesn't really matter. The last one here is one that I wish was broken. It's the engine runtime meter, which is what they use to determine how much to bill me for using the airplane. Unfortunately, though, it always seems to be working just fine. Here I'm just going to slow it back down to normal speed so you can look at my second solo landing of the day. Admittedly, it's pretty similar to the first one, though, which is, I guess, a good thing. Continuing on with all of the instrument stuff, just below the engine instruments is a row of fuses, one for each main part of the aircraft electrical system. Up here is the cylinder head temperature. This would indicate if there's any problem with the liquid cooling system for the cylinder heads. This big one is the tachometer, which shows the engine RPM. Most of the airplanes out there use engines that operate in the 2,000 to 3,000 RPM range, but the Rotax engine in this Ultralight runs much faster at up to 6,000 RPM. Now this is a way faster speed than the propeller can handle, so there is a fixed ratio gearbox that reduces the propeller RPM to a bit less than half of the engine RPM. Some of the other stuff in the cockpit includes the GPS navigation system and the VHF radio for communication. There's a magnetic compass up here to keep it away from magnetic interference from the electrical systems. Mounted down below the dash is a Mode C transponder. Whenever an air traffic control radar detects the plane, the transponder transmits a signal back that tells air traffic controllers an identification number and our exact altitude. And this is required equipment at most airports in the GTA and around the world. This thing that's stuck to the window is a Nemo Scout. It's a GPS location transmitter. It's constantly sending the aircraft position to the internet via the cell phone network. Many small aircraft have these so that they can see each other's position in real time, much like the larger ADS-B systems on commercial aircraft. I've noticed that whenever I'm flying with my instructor, pretty much every time that we spot another aircraft in the sky somewhere, he will invariably pull out his cell phone right away and go to the Nemo website and look around on the map to see if he can figure out which aircraft it is that we're seeing. And it has been a pretty handy tool because there have been several times where we saw an aircraft on the map before we saw them with our eyes, which really helps with the situational awareness. Anyway, here I am coming in for landing number 3. Down at the bottom there are the 2 fuel shutoff valves, one for each tank. There's a parking brake down there as well. One time after landing I accidentally left the parking brake on, and my poor instructor Colin, he pulled the plane all the way back into the hangar with the brakes on before I realized I had done that. I felt really bad. He was all out of breath and sweating and everything. He was a good sport about it though. Finishing up the rest of the cockpit, directly in front of me I've got a Garmin avionics unit. This is a fancy schmancy digital display. It shows my airspeed, vertical speed, altitude, my pitch and roll angles, and my ground speed all in one place. It's pretty cool, but I personally hardly ever use it because I actually kind of preferred reading the old-fashioned dials and gauges. As mentioned before, this one is the vertical speed indicator that shows how fast I'm climbing or descending. This one's the altimeter. Over here I have the airspeed indicator, and this instrument is a turn coordinator. It's a gyroscopic instrument that's supposed to show you how much you're turning and whether or not you're doing it right. But as you can see, this thing kind of bounces all over the place, especially in choppy weather, so it's actually kind of useless. I pretty much never use it. Since I'm talking about everything in the cockpit, we might as well just go over the rest. Over here is a G-force indicator. This plane is rated for only plus 3.5 or minus 1 Gs, and so it doesn't really make any sense that this thing is on this plane. My instructor and I both can't figure out why it's there, but it's there and it works, and there's no point in taking it out, so there you go. Over here, these are the two magneto switches. They control the electronic ignition system for the aircraft. This is the electric fuel pump switch. These are switches for the exterior lights. Over here, there's some intercom adjustments. And finally, this is the trim indicator. The trim is a little flap at the back of the tail, which basically can be pointed up or down so that you don't need to be constantly pulling or pushing on the stick during level flight. It'll just let you, kind of relax your grip a bit. The controls for adjusting the trim are the buttons on the top of the stick, and on the back of the stick where your index finger would go, there's a push-to-talk button for the radio. Of course, the last major thing in the cockpit is me. And at this point in the flight, I've completed all of the minimum requirements necessary for the Ultralight pilot permit. That's 10 hours of dual instruction. That's instruction, flying with the instructor. I actually have more than 20 hours, so I'm good to go there. 2 hours of solo flight time, as well as 20 takeoffs and landings with the instructor in the plane with me, and I actually have more like 50 or 53 or something, and 10 solo takeoffs and landings. That's with me just by myself, which I have achieved during this flight that you've been watching. So a couple of weeks after I post this video, I'm going to be writing the Transport Canada Ultralight Pilot Permit exam. Actually have to go to the Transport Canada office to write that one. I've been studying for it for months now, and the amount of material to remember is insane, but I think I'm going to do just fine on all that. And I've also got the other stuff that I need to obtain the Ultralight pilot permit, including my aeronautical radio operator certificate and my Category 3 aviation medical certificate, which involved me going through an extremely comprehensive medical exam. The only thing that they didn't do, thankfully, was butt stuff. So anyway, once I've got that exam written in a couple of weeks, then I'm good to go. I just need to fill out some paperwork with my instructor, submit it all, and hopefully by the springtime I'll have my actual ultralight pilot permit, and I can rent a plane with it and fly around and terrorize the skies and all that kind of good stuff. It's going to be awesome. If you were going to ask me how much money all of this cost, the answer is a lot. I spent just a little bit less than 13,000 Canadian dollars over the course of the summer to obtain this permit. The biggest chunk of change, of course, was for all of the dual flight instruction. It's $150 an hour to rent the plane, plus $90 an hour for my instructor, and every lesson is at least an hour of plane rental and 2 hours of instructor time. So each lesson is like around $340, and I've had like 23 lessons or something. So that was $8,000 right there. As for what's next, I'm going to take the winter off, and then after that, I'm hoping that next spring I'll get back in the cockpit and continue my education with my instructor, learn to become a more skilled pilot. I want to work towards my passenger carrying rating so that I can take people up with me, and that's probably going to take all next year, and after that I'm not too sure. Maybe I'll go for my private pilot permit so I can fly bigger airplanes and stuff. Who knows? The sky is literally the limit. Anyways, guys, that's pretty much it for me. So thank you very, very much for watching if you made it this far, and I will see you next time.